I do have women who come in specifically wanting a white guy. That is a common theme. I have a theory. I call it go bold or go home, but also keep it positive. And if it didn't happen, let's just say she said no or whatever, don't always jump to it. It's just because I'm Asian and the white man. It's a very common thing to dive into, but it's very bad for mental health. If you're looking for failure, you will get failure. If you're looking for success, you have a much better chance of getting it.
Hello and welcome to another Dating Beyond Borders podcast. Today, I'm joined by Cassindy Chao, a former Goldman Sachs banker turned expert matchmaker who specializes in helping Asian Americans navigate the complexities of dating. She's the author of Ancient Wisdom, Modern Love, Chinese Wisdom for Dating and Relationship Success, and has been featured in Business Insider, numerous podcasts, and as a speaker at the Harvard Club and Penn Club. Today, we'll dive into Asian American dating, exploring the biggest challenges, how online dating affects Asian American men in particular, and are the dating apps dead? Welcome, Cassindy.
Thank you so much, Rita. I'm so excited to be on your podcast. I love your messaging about dating beyond borders. I mean, it's so important in today's global world.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. Cassindy, I'm so curious about Asian American dating. It's the first podcast that I have today that actually addresses this. I talked a lot about Asia specifically or American dating, but not the overlapping Asian and American dating. So I'm just going to start with a big question, which is, what are some of the unique struggles that Asian Americans face when it comes to, let's talk about in particular before we get into the dating scene.
Sure. I think, and I love that you're honing on this nuance because, you've got people from China, from Taiwan, from Hong Kong, right? But the thing is with Asian Americans or Asian Canadians or Asians that are part of the diaspora of all over the world, there's a lot, London has a large Asian community as well, that the struggles are actually different in dating. And part of it is because a lot of the parents emigrated, right? And then you have the second generation that grew up in the new countries, in this case, United States. But meanwhile, the parents still have values that have come from maybe like 40 years ago, 50 years ago. But meanwhile, Asia may have already kind of jumped ahead, but the parents still have these older values. And because they're immigrants, sometimes they cling harder to their original values, even though they're now outdated. And meanwhile, you have this new generation growing up with these parental expectations from another era. And meanwhile, they're also balancing trying to fit in to their new country, right? And their parents aren't necessarily able to guide them because they don't have that experience. So it's a different experience altogether, I feel.
What are those expectations? So just from the top of my head, I'm thinking, okay, you need to go into certain professions, such as become a doctor. The stereotypical cliche, like Asian parents, pressures, doctor, engineer, those are the only professions that we can support. And you need to not, work really hard at that. How much of that is true?
Oh, so much. You hit it right on the head. Because if you think about it, if immigrants are in a new country, they want success. They came out for a reason, right? And so, of course, they want their children to succeed, or they want to succeed in this new environment, right? So the expectations are 100% true. And, my joke is no parent ever, expected their kid to grow up to be a matchmaker, right? This is not what they expected, right? So for the parents, they want their kids to be scientists or doctors or lawyers, anything that's financially stable, right? So it is an expectation. It's still very, very real. And here we fast forward, we're in 2025 and it's still a thing. Like I see it still amongst all the parents. And not only that, even the Asian Americans who grew up here, they carry that intergenerational expectation now down to their kids. It's really interesting how these behaviors still are there about surviving, growing, thriving in the new country. And a lot of it comes from financial stability expectations. And also because of the societal, people all talk, it's also a lot of pride. Oh, my son went to here, my daughter went there. It's just part of the conversation.
Now, when it comes to finding a relationship, are there certain things that typically Asian American parents will tell their kids not to do, such as don't date until a certain age. You should only get married to a rich man, things like that.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of expectations of like, oh, well, if they don't carry on the culture, if they don't understand me, as a parent, so then don't date outside of your race, right? There's, that is still real. It's not always followed, but it is real, and people do that. And there's expectations like, only date, let's say Chinese American, only date Korean, only date, and that is the thing. Meanwhile, the younger generation is pushing back because the Asian American experience is not just, let's just say Hong Kong Chinese or Taiwan Chinese or Korean or Japanese American. A lot of times it's more Pan Asian now. So, anyways, I didn't mean to delve into that, but yeah.
And what does it mean, Pan Asian, for somebody who doesn't know?
So, for example, Pan Asian might be, for example, uh, Japan, Korea, like all like North Asia, right? All the different countries, a lot of them have, when they came to the US, there are similar expectations, right? There's similar, expectations for work ethic, for family, for education. So a lot of people feel like they want to be understood when they date. They want to feel safe when they date. And somebody who's also Asian American would understand that. But I do say that Asians were not monolithic, right? I love how you talked about that with me earlier, how like, it is not monolithic. There's ABC, which is American born Chinese, right? There's different phrases that we use for different groupings because we are not monolithic.
Mm.
So we're different, yet we share certain shared experiences in terms of, how we're viewed as in the United States, right? If I'm walking down the street, they just view me as Asian, right? They won't necessarily know them Chinese, Japanese, Korean, et cetera, right? For example.
Now, you work with a lot of clients that are obviously Asian American. Do you find that those clients deal with those struggles? My parents want me to date XYZ, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to date maybe an Asian guy, or I don't want to date, I don't specifically want to look for somebody in my community, or I don't specifically want to look for somebody who makes a ton of money. Like, I'm in love with this guy who's an artist. My parents don't support that. Have you seen any of this?
Oh, all the time, all the time. And I see both sides. So I see, I see people who are saying, I don't want to date Asian American. I want to date, Caucasian or African American. I'm open, right? A lot of people will feel comfortable because they want to date. They don't want to date what their parents want. Or some of them may be looking at their parents' relationships and saying, this is not what I want, right? This doesn't make me thrive, right? I want something a little different. I also see people who followed what their parents wanted and are now divorced and looking for somebody different. Or also, they deliberately did not marry what their parents wanted, but yet inadvertently got themselves into running away from one issue, got them into a different issue, and now they're divorced and looking for somebody new. So I see it all. Like basically, it's yeah. I feel like I call myself the clearinghouse of dating. Right. So many people come in with different issues and different themes, and a lot of it comes from this parental pressure. And so, and it manifests itself in different variations. Right.
If I come to you and I say, Cassindy, my parents want me to date so and so, but this is not really what I want. Yet I feel guilty and I don't want to displease my parents, which I can assume is one of the bigger struggles. It's not that just my parents want this, but I also feel like a certain guilt because my parents sacrificed so much as immigrants and they came to this new country and now they simply want me to be successful. What do you usually tell those people?
I tell them, I go, look, at the end of the day, it's your life. It's not your parents' life. And you do have to practice drawing boundaries with your own parents on that too. That's part of kind of growing up and letting go. The guilt is the hard part. We have to shut that out because it's just going to hurt our spirit. The key is, does this person make you happy? Does this person see you? And I think sometimes when you talk to your parents, you also say, look, if I'm with somebody who's, wealthy, the kind of person that you want, but crushes my spirit, then that's not going to make me happy either. Then that's not going to make me, financially sound or able to thrive. And that has its own economic cost as well. Like I see it so often where people are shouldering this guilt from their parents, so their parents sacrifice so much for them, right? They carry that. And so they feel like they have to please them. Of course, I understand the impetus and I respect it, but ultimately it backfires because if you're not valuing yourself and your own happiness, then that's not healthful because it will hurt your psychological happiness long term. And that has a huge cost. And I think I would explain that to the parents that, look, this is important to me. You can also dig into like, what are the fears, right? What are your concerns, right? And just go like, acknowledge this, right? Sometimes some parents also feel like if you marry outside of your culture, the new partner won't understand them. They will lose their daughter. They will lose their son. And there's ways to mitigate that as well, right? There's ways to integrate the partner into the new life. And sometimes it's very beautiful. It's really beautiful when your partner really wants to learn about your culture and really wants to learn learn about your parents. That's actually quite beautiful too. You don't take that for granted. So there's different ways to flip it and to change the narrative and really look at it from a more positive perspective. Because I think as immigrants, we do tend to have a little bit of fear, right? We're worried that, oh, we're going to lose our daughter. We're going to not make money. We're going to, all this fear because that's what drove us to succeed. But I think changing the narrative is important, especially for mental health.
Yeah.
I got too much.
No, I think it's scary to realize at the end of your life that you lived someone else's life. And but at the same time, it's really easy for, let's say, non-Asian or, let's say Caucasian people who are specifically, like, I come from an Eastern European background and we're much closer to our parents as well in that sense. Whereas I feel like a lot of Americans and Canadians, it's very easy for them to move out of their house at 18 years old. And then just, my mom wants me to do this, but I don't care. A lot of cultures don't feel that way. It's almost like you always carry the sense of guilt for choosing to live your life the way you want to live it. And it's often very hard to distinguish between what your parents want and what you want, because you really want to make them happy. Have you had any anecdotes, any stories of anybody specifically that has dealt with this challenge, or maybe any other challenges, in dating?
Okay, so two questions. One, are there any unique stories about this? Yes, I do have one. So that's the first. I do have one. So she's a doctor, and always took care of her parents, but she really didn't take care of herself. Right. So now she finds herself, fast forward, single and a little older, and she realized that, wait, maybe I would like to have a partner too. Right. So I found her somebody who is in a way just like her. He wasn't Chinese; he was Jewish Jewish, but they both had a love of culture and education, and it was wonderful. Like when they both kind of came together because they both started to value themselves. Right. I think that's so important.
Hey everyone, just a quick note to say that while I love putting these podcasts together each week, they do take a ton of time and effort. So if you're enjoying the show, please be sure to follow on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're tuning in, and give this podcast a 5-star rating to help it grow. This support really helps me keep improving the show's quality. Thank you, and back to the episode.
Second question you had was, what are other themes that I see? And I see a lot. There's a lot of anxiety amongst the Asian American community. There's a lot of stereotypes, right? Whether it's Asian women or Asian men, we're dealing with so many stereotypes, right? People will come in with preconceived notions. That's hard. There's also a lot of expectation that we put on ourselves. You talked about guilt, right? About not marrying what your parents want. There's also a lot of guilt and expectations built upon being capable, being the person who gets things done, right? There's, I think, an article about elder sister syndrome, but I think it's very, very prevalent for Asian females, right? We have to be capable. There's a lot of conditional love going on. Basically, oh, you're lovable because you get things done. You take care of the family. You take care of this. You do this. And that's a common theme amongst many, many Asian women, right? And the ability to draw boundaries is really, really hard. Does not come naturally, right? It also affects Asian men too, because a lot of expectations, the son, the blah blah, right? It's a lot to grapple with, and that also explains why sometimes many Asian Americans want to meet other Asian Americans because they can understand what they're dealing with. But that's not always so. I mean, like at the end of the day, my matchmaking practice, I work with all races, right? South Asian, African American, Latinx, we all, it's very open, right? I don't work with, I have a very strong, I call it Asians and those who love them, right? So I work with, the broader community.
Let's talk about those stereotypes that you'd mentioned. For example, well, let's start with Asian men because I feel like they get hit with a lot. I mean, both Asian men and women, actually, now that I think about it. But let's start with Asian men because I find that they struggle the most when it comes to dating. Or do they? Because from what I know, you did some research into it and you've come up with some very interesting findings. So let's talk about Asian men in dating. What are the stereotypes that they get hit with the most?
Well, I'd say a lot of it stems, gosh, maybe like 20, 30 years earlier with all these poor stereotypes about Asian men, which is really unfortunate, right? You had Eddie Murphy making jokes, you had 16 Candles, right? And that was just a nasty ass narrative. And it's really unfortunate, right? Um, but I'm more positive because I think in the last several years, there's been so much more change in media, right? There's so many more Asian male actors, whether it's Simu Liu or Russell Jang or Justin Chan, Steve O, yeah, all these different faces that are now coming up as being, also K-pop, right? There's so many more kind of interesting views of Asian men that are very different from the one-dimensional side we had before, right? So I'm optimistic that change is happening. But it's been hard, right? I think for a lot of Asian men growing up, as kids on the schoolyard, it's no fun, right? Getting made fun of. And Asian women too. I mean, I remember growing up, Chinese, Japanese, dirty knees, look at these. I'm like, it's still smart. It still hurts, right? Remember these things. Um, so I think it's still there, but I do think it's changing. I'm advocating for more change because I call Asian men the dating trifecta, right? A lot of women come to me, oh, I want a guy who's smart, who's financially sound, who cares about family. I'm like, oh my God, I've got your community, right? And it used to be, oh, no, no, no. But I think now it's changing. And I'm really heartened by that. I even got one woman who's like, oh, I really want to date a Korean guy. I'm like, well, are you fetishizing? Just be careful here, right? She's like, why? I go, why only Korean, right? And she said, oh, because I had a great experience when I was in college. I'm like, okay then. But it's interesting how at least I feel like things are shifting. It's not shifting enough, but we all as a community strive to change this, right? We
Yeah.
strive to change this. Like evolution one was Asian men that are hot and attractive, right? And evolution two is not, you don't have to be chiseled or fit or perfectly chiseled, angled, like, Daniel Dickens in order to be considered attractive. You can also just be yourself, a regular guy, and still be attractive, just like the rest, like let's just say Caucasian men, different types can all be considered attractive in their own way. The funny guy, the this, the that. So it's nice to kind of start shifting away from just the chiseled guy look, but also now just to like a really good guy, right? Or somebody who's really smart and funny, et cetera. And I like to see this expansion of stereotypes to have more nuance because people are nuanced. We're not one dimensional.
Yeah, it's interesting also that you mentioned the fetishization of Korean men, because obviously with K-pop, that's been a new thing to travel to Korea. And I've had quite a lot of friends that told me that they really are into Korean guys. They've never dated one; they've just seen them on in shows. So you're right. It used to be fetishization of Asian women. Now it's fetishization of specifically Korean men. Pretty funny.
I mean, I'm sorry. I watched that TV show. What was it? The Island. Oh my gosh! Wow, so cute. Like wow. Okay, don't look at Cindy, but they're really
They're definitely very pretty boys. Very, very, very cute. So I understand. I understand it to a degree. Do you have people, clients come to you actually and say, I want to date country X? Does that happen a lot?
It happens every now and then, and we try to tease it out, like why, right? Because at the end of the day, like you can't date a dream, right? Because you're just going to end up being ultimately disappointed, right? That's the point, right? So I try to unpack, right, what it is, right? Because that's important, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm in it for long-term success, right? I'm not playing I'm not a dating, sort recruiter. Basically, I'm a matchmaker, right? I'm looking for what they're looking for a long-term relationship, right? And so they're asking for only one. it's important to understand why, right? And no judgment. Sometimes they do feel a need for the parents or whatever, and that's fine. Like we talk it through, and if that's what they want, that's what they want. Like I don't judge.
A couple of questions to you. Do you have when you have Asian female clients? If you could be honest with me, if you're comfortable answering this question, do you find that they're looking, if they are naming, I want to date a certain ethnicity, do they prefer more Asian guys or do they prefer other cultures when it comes to Asian women in the US?
So it depends. I do have women who come in specifically wanting a white guy, right? That is a common theme, and I do see that, right?
Mm.
I also see more and more now a lot of Asian women who want another Asian American guy, right? I think at the end of the day, tastes are shifting. We're as a community evolving. I think there's a lot of growth, right? So, for example, a lot of times, a lot of the younger generation looks at their families and their own parent dynamics, and they're also able to start thinking what they want it to be and what it not to be,
Mhm.
right? And I see a lot of Asian men say, I want a close relationship with my partner, right? Which is different, right? I mean, sometimes in the past, it was more like the dad went off to work, I mean, again, I'm stereotyping, but a lot of times, it was very hard, right? So the dads were working. So the guys, the sons didn't necessarily get the tools growing up to know how it is to be a really loving partner. So I think for a while, for some Asian women, the feeling was like, well, the non-Asian men are actually really nice and good loving partners, and that's what we want, right?
Mhm.
But I think things are shifting, and so it's 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 evolving. Shall we say?
Do you know, is there a reason why you think it's evolving? Is it that there you see, like you said, we see more Asian men as leads in romantic movies, or is it that, I don't know, something else is happening in society?
Well, I think there's I would say the Asian American community, there's a lot of introspection going on, right? There's a lot of thinking about like, oh, you know, there's a lot of consideration. Oh, do I draw boundaries well? Do I not? What are, my parents' relationship was different. It's how people, there's a lot of comments about intergenerational trauma, and it's a lot of understanding. And as we understand that, that kind of opens our minds a little bit like, oh, our parents did this because they had to when they were surviving, right? But now we're in this next generation where we're not just about surviving, we're about thriving and having better relationships, right? So I think we're all kind of evolving along the path. But I think people, I mean, who doesn't want a great relationship with their partner, right? We actually want that. And we're not necessarily bound together just by obligation, which is what happened in the earlier generations when they came out. But now, if they're thriving and having fun with each other, people want that. Like, that's what a lot of us want. We all want to be seen and validated. Like, who doesn't?
Right.
Right. So I think that if we're all dating better and dating more wisely and thinking about what we want from our parents' relationship and we don't want, it makes us better daters. And I have a theory that I call it what you put out really influences what you track back. Right.
Mhm.
So if you're putting out a feeling of like openness and introspection and like wanting to validate and seeing people, what you track back is more of the same. Right. And so I think that's really important because my mission, my secret mission is that I think if we're all thriving, you know, ultimately we're economically more successful also, right? Because we're thriving, we're doing what we like, we don't have mental health issues as much, right? So I have a secret mission that we all like date better.
Yeah, and I really want to talk to you about online dating versus matchmaking. But I do have a question for you. So there is a study that I found, which is quite, I wouldn't say negative, but kind of interesting. So there's a study that found that Asian women are more likely to respond to white men than Asian men, and that Asian men pursue Asian women 2 times more frequently than non-Asian women, severely restricting the pool. I would love to hear your thoughts on it because you just told me that, well, for women, like it does vary, right? Do you have Asian men coming to you and are they looking more for Asian women?
Oh, absolutely. So let me unpack this a little bit. Okay, so the study that you saw, and I took a look at it too, they found that Asian were more likely to respond to white men. I think part of it is also is how you do the outreach, right? So think of it this way. If you're relatively confident, you feel like, you have nothing to lose. And so you just go approach somebody, hey, do you want to go on a date? Oh, you look great, whatever, right? So it's very confident, kind of very positive, right? Because you're expecting success. Now, fast forward, let's just say, let's look to maybe an Asian gentleman who's a great person, but maybe their mindset is not expecting success, right? So there's always this feeling of like, oh, there's negative stereotypes and these things, and it kind of hurts their soul a little bit. So now when they make the approach, it's more guarded. Hey, you want to do this? I'm not really into it, but maybe, right? And so the message to the woman is kind of like, was this guy into me or not? Right? So yes, they might make the approach, but I think it's how you make the approach that actually is really important. So you have to go back to like why they're not doing as well. And partially it's, I feel, is the way you're doing the approach is actually more guarded and not upbeat and more. And so to any woman, Asian or non-Asian, you would respond much more to the more upbeat, more kind of bold inquiry versus the one that's a little more tentative.
Yeah.
So I have a theory, I call it go bold or go home, but also keep it positive. And if it didn't happen, let's just say she said no or whatever, it's not, don't always jump to it. It's just because I'm Asian and the white man. It's a very common thing to dive into, but it's very bad for mental health. It's very bad for thinking because it makes us wallow. Because for an Asian gentleman, the feeling like this is not something I can change. This is what I'm born with. Right. And to be rejected based upon that really hurts. But I think you really need to change the narrative because sometimes you need to think about like, well, how can I optimize? Right. If I come in expecting, like, if you're looking for failure, you will get failure. If you're looking for success, you have a much better chance of getting it.
The sad thing that I notice with online dating is when I see Asian guys, a lot of them, they hide their Asianness. They'll wear sunglasses. And I think it's what you just pointed to. It's that insecurity that is, I've been rejected X amount of times, which means that it's the Asian thing that's, the reason that it's not going well. Therefore, nowadays, when I approach women, I'm going to do that in a meek and less confident manner, which doesn't help anybody, right? It's like, there are men that are, and not a great example because obviously it's not the same, but for example, if you're maybe not a certain height and then you're like, oh, my height is the issue. And so you internalize that. And then
angry. You get angry, right?
And you get angry and you get hostile and you start picking fights. That seems to happen a lot with shorter men. But it's a lot of times it's not even that. It's now, maybe there is a woman that doesn't care how tall you are, but now you're so angry and you're so bitter and you're so, you have such confidence problems that you come off in that way because now the world, your narrative, as you said, is that women don't like me. Women like guy X, they like this guy with the chiseled jawline, which may not be the case. But now you've told yourself this story, and that's how you come into the world. That's how you approach women. Thereby, the narrative remains the same.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
100%, Marina. And there's so much anger, right? And I think for a lot of Asian women, we react very, very allergically to anger sometimes because of our dads, right? When we grew up. So it's a bad combination, right? Because if you sense somebody's angry, a lot of us will just kind of shy away.
Yeah.
That is really an issue.
Guys, if anyone here is Asian American, I know there are quite a lot of Asian Americans watching this, or Asian Canadian, or tell us your personal experiences. If you're a man, what has been your personal experiences online? I would love to hear your stories because this is really interesting. Now, when it comes to Asian American women, what are some struggles that they face? What are some stereotypes? You'd also mentioned that there was a woman that you worked with that was a hard worker, and that at a certain age she realized that her pool was getting smaller. Do you feel there's also pressure on Asian American women to marry by a certain age?
Yes. Before we jump into this, I just want to share one since you're talking to your viewers as well. So I have sons, right? I have a daughter and two sons, right? And it's really important for them to date well too, right? And I realize I had my own limitations as a parent because I was also a little bit critical and I've been changing that. But I remember at one point in time, I said to my middle son, go bold or go home, right? And the point was, you kind of have to go out there. And I realized he couldn't do it. So finally I said to him, you're doing this like sailing class in Oakland. I go, why don't you have your boat tip over? Oh, Ma, I can't do that. And I said, you know something? Let it flip over. If it flips over, I'll jump into this really gross, dirty lake, which I did. And in the that week, he flipped his boat over. He rescued it back up again. It was fine. But then he goes, Ma, now you need to jump into the lake. But the point, and I did it. But the point was, it's important to go bold, right? Because life's not going to just go, oh yeah, go meekly. Sometimes you kind of have to just do it. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that I really like that advice. I think that's really relevant for anybody that's dating or anybody that's living in this world.
Exactly. Because, anyways. Okay. So back to your question about Asian female stereotype. Oh, sorry, I missed it again.
Yeah, Asian female like what are the challenges that Asian women face in dating? Yeah.
Okay, so yes, lots of stereotypes there too. Because look at the fetishization, right? Oh, exotic, submissive, et cetera, which is so far from the truth, right? We're not submissive, bossy,
Tiger mom,
tiger moms, or not, or reformed. But yeah, so those are stereotypes, right? And it's unfortunate because again, we're all human beings, we're all multi-layered, we're all, and it's hard, right? It's hard to be like, some of my Asian clients, but they might be online, they get all sorts of ridiculous comments like, hey baby, hey this, show them this, that I think people trespass their boundaries more so than with other groups. And I think for an Asian female to get this kind of, in your feed is really obnoxious, right? And and it hurts the head after a while, right? Because you're looking at this and like, this is not who I am. I don't like being treated this way. And, the online situation is, sometimes you can't control it, right?
Yeah. And do you feel like there is a pressure for women to get married by a certain age? There is a word in Chinese and Mandarin, I think, the leftover woman, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. It depends on different countries. Like in China, I think it's a lot earlier, like 26, right? There's, there's different saying, but yes, there is a saying about if you're not married by a certain age, basically the whole point is to have kids, right? So if you're not married, having kids by a certain age, then you're considered a leftover, which I think is really stupid. And I think it's very unfortunate. And I'm sure the people who propagate this are not women, because we want our lives too, right? We're not just about breeding kids, right? We're also about we're capable, we're doing fun things, we're smart, we're contributing to our community, right? And that's really too bad. It is that way. Parents feel that all the time because even when you hear the parents like the older generation talking, like I listen to my dad or my aunties or uncles, the same thing. Oh, my daughter's married yet? Or oh, am I having kids yet? Right? It's the same thing. It's like it's never about wow. Has your daughter been promoted at Goldman Sachs? Or has your daughter been CEO of a software company? Right? That's more interesting, right? But no, they never talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I feel like having a baby is wonderful to anybody that wants it, but it's not an achievement. I mean, it's great, but it's not something that you have to work towards. It's quite simple. And do you find that a lot of women nowadays, I mean, they're not really wanting to have children? Do you think it's harder for Asian American women because of that pressure to procreate?
I think there's some expectation and pressure, but I see a good amount of a woman pushing back on that because they also see like, I mean, it's a life of not servitude, but it's also really, like when you can't unhave kids, right? It's a big responsibility. And, it's a major lifestyle change. And I think some people just don't want it. They've seen their mom sacrifice too much, the parents sacrifice. And they're like, look, I'm not having it. I don't need it. I fully acknowledge that, in my own family, I would say that one of my children will most definitely not be having kids.
Mm.
And that's fine. That is their life. That is their choice. And that's fine. And it should be that way, right? It should be that way.
Cassindy, working as a matchmaker, do you feel like there is an exhaustion around dating apps, specifically maybe for Asian Americans or in general?
It is really hard. And I would say not even amongst the Asian, I think for all communities, there is a lot of difficulty with the online dating apps, although some are better than others, right? And kind of what I say is, when you're dating, it's really like a portfolio, like an investment portfolio. I'm bringing my Goldman Sachs in. It's like an investment portfolio because, you might have people, your friends introducing, you might have a matchmaker, a dating coach, you might have, at work or in real life. But online apps are still a great source for meeting people just because there's a big volume there. That is a volume that is very efficient. Well, it can be efficient. Let's put it that way. It can be efficient.
Yeah.
But there's some apps that are better than others, like, right? And now with AI, you don't know, is your AI talking to their AI? Is somebody kind of providing canned answers? It becomes very, very impersonal. And the whole goal of any dating app is to get off the app and meet in real life. So using it not to find your soulmate per se, but just to harvest people to meet is really the way we should look at it. I do like, for example, Coffee Meets Bagel because they talk about values, right? And that aligns with me. It's not like I don't knock Tinder, but it's not my values. It's not the values that I espouse, right? I like serious dating. I'm about building families, building relationships, right? That's what matters to me. And so, for example, again, I'm just naming Coffee Meets Bagel as an app because they are like, oh, what are your values? They lead with that, right? To me, that's kind of nice, right?
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a point that people come to you? Because I mean, when you're dating as a younger person, let's say 20s to 35, your first incline isn't to go to a matchmaker unless you're looking for a serious relationship and you realize that it's really hard to find online. Is there a point that people come to you and they say, I need help?
Yeah. And it's interesting because the age has gotten younger and younger. It
Ooh.
used to be, and I even had parents come to me. And if I were looking at this, if I were single and I was out of college for a few years, I'd probably engage in a matchmaker, on a more limited basis because obviously matchmakers cost money and, because it exposes you to a bigger pool, right? We are really the super highway for single people, right? We get a lot in our database, right? And so we kind of see what's going on. Um, I would, but that's just me. But I also think online dating has its role because you get to practice a lot of dates too, right? If you're going to bomb a date, why not bomb with strangers? You don't have to worry that much,
Mm.
right? And that way you kind of know what you really want. And then when you work with a matchmaker or dating coach or whomever, you have a much better idea of who makes sense for you, who makes you feel good, et cetera. So sometimes the dating apps do have their values for sure.
When someone comes to you and they say, I want to find a relationship, what are the top 3 qualities that you think are the most important and the ones that are the least important in finding a long term partner?
Let's start with the least important. Oh,
Don't
you
say
know,
looks.
yeah, well, height, looks, everyone's coming through with the same checklist, right? It's like, okay, well, what about you? Right? Why don't they ask back, well, what do you bring to the table? And sometimes people are like, huh? They give me this unicorn checklist. Oh, has to be this height, has to. Whenever I hear the word has to, or they'll say, oh, Cassindy, I'm not really that picky. I just want somebody who is, went to these set of schools, earns this much money, must earn over this much, and they're really picky. This happens all the time. And then, but what really matters is I'll say like, well, how does this person make you feel? Right? Does this person really see you? Do you feel seen? Can you communicate with this person? Do you know each other's love languages? Right? Can you thrive with this person? Right? And people forget that. They forget that all the
Yes.
time. And they don't realize there's a huge cost to not having that. They just think, oh, if I marry a guy who has an Ivy League degree or a woman who's got, went to these schools or is this looks, that's somehow magic and that solves their problems. You know, Not realizing that if you want to start a family, it's not just about some hot gal who, looks great at a club, but also somebody who is warm and kind and nurturing and makes you feel good, right? You want to come home to her.
Yeah.
There's so many different factors that people just forget about, which is what you
Yeah. It's true. There is a phrase that I heard which really stuck with me, which is you cannot carpool with someone you're going in different directions with. And it's
true.
true because in my past relationship, I focused a lot on the chemistry, but I I completely lost track of the fact that the way we saw life and the way we saw what makes us happy and where we're going in life was completely different. Like if you're someone who is excited about traveling or moving or, you know, finding someone who's a homebody who doesn't want any of that, who sees life completely differently, what's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years, or the way, but there's many things like this. It's just one of the examples. You said feeling seen in a relationship, I think, is incredibly important. People don't give that much credit. They'll just focus on the short-term stuff like, oh, but they're so hot and
I
they're so
know.
smart, but like, how do you feel around them? That's their qualities, right?
Exactly.
How do you feel?
Yeah, and life throws at us so many challenges in life, right? We forget about, our parents get ill, we might have illnesses, accidents, have all sorts of things happen in our lives. And you really need a partner who supports you and loves you and honors you and mutual, right? And we stretch each other in different ways a little bit too. I just got back from my 25th year wedding anniversary trip with my husband, right? And, he has his issues too. I told him, if you're going to be cranky, you're not coming on the trip with me. I'm going to go by myself, right? But we did. And we did things that I would normally never do. We went on motorbikes in Vietnam. I went scuba diving, right? We did things that we normally don't do, but it was nice, right? It's nice to just stretch each other, and do different things.
Yeah. Cassindy, I would love to keep talking to you, but I know you have other commitments today. So I wanted to thank you for taking part in the podcast and, sharing your experience. It was really interesting to me to kind of discover how it's not just Asians date or Americans date, but Asian Americans. Obviously, there's a lot more that we could get into. If anybody wants to see another podcast featuring Cassindy, please let me know so we could continue talking about this. Cassindy, thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much, Marina. I really love your messaging. And I love the whole theme of dating beyond borders. I really do think we're in an international world today. So thank you. Thank you for all your questions. I love it.
Thanks.